Remove carcinogens and get your gear compliant clean with Unimac laundry equipment. Find it at alliancelaundry.com/fire.
Welcome to the Fueling Fire podcast, the first and best nutrition podcast for first responders. We bring in the wellness experts who know the fire service, but can break down the science so that you don't have to. This podcast will help you eat better when you don't have time, money, or energy. I'm Megan Lautz, a civilian dietitian obsessed with helping firefighters boost energy and lose body fat while on shift work without the stress. Let's get into the podcast. Welcome back to the Fueling Fire podcast, and today I am scared because we are talking about the carnivore diet, and as a people pleaser, I have a feeling that this podcast may offend some hardcore carnivore peeps, but really what I want to do is kind of discuss the carnivore diet and the application to the fire service, specifically like energy levels, weight loss goals, like prevention of heart disease and cancer, mental health conditions, all of those things. I want to talk about that in the context of this diet because it's a huge fad right now. I would say it's been picking up over the past year or two, but just in this past year, I've seen quite a few people interested in the carnivore diet. And I want to discuss it for people who are on the fence, right? Who aren't super hardcore into this. They're not really sure about it. They don't know if they should do it because one guy at the station's doing it and they're, hard sold into it. So that's what this is going to be. This podcast will be about today, is talking about the considerations for the fire service and whether or not this might be a good fit for you or not, right? And what is the carnivore diet? So the carnivore diet is kind of like a subset of keto. So if you remember in the fire service, 2015, 2017, keto was huge, right? And not to be too sarcastic, but like, how long did that last, right? Like maybe 2018, 2019, like it did not get to COVID, like most people who went on to keto, they tried it for a while, they lost a good bit of weight, and then, they kind of hard fell off it because it's just not a flexible diet from a standpoint of long-term enjoyment, right? You can't have a cupcake at your kid's birthday party. You can't have a beer at your captain's retirement. The lifestyle flexibility just isn't really there for keto. So most people, I don't really know any actually firefighters who stayed on keto long-term. They transitioned to a lower carb diet to get a little bit more flexibility. But essentially, that's what carnivore is a subset of the ketogenic diet. However, it does not include any fruits, veggies, grains, anything that's not coming from an animal. So you're only eating animal-based foods here. So if we look at the standard day for a carnivore diet, breakfast is like scrambled eggs cooked in butter with bacon. Lunch is a ribeye steak with like some beef jerky. Your snacks include hard-boiled eggs or cheese sticks. Dinner might be a salmon patty. And then dessert, if you will, would be some sort of like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, right? So, at the start of the day, some of you, I probably had you there. You're like, eggs and bacon? Perfect. Sounds great. Like sign me up for that diet. But this also includes liquids, right? So the only liquids that are on this diet, if you are strictly following keto, is like water and like beef-based or like animal-based broth, right? So that knocks out coffee, that knocks out tea. Those are from plants, right? That knocks out alcohol. And there are some subsets of carnivore that will still incorporate those foods or beverages. But for the most part, the really hardcore carnivores are not going to follow those kinds of things. So with that, as you can imagine, if you're only eating animal-based products, this can be kind of difficult to follow. And that's important to note because I think a lot of first responders automatically assume that in order to eat healthy, or in order to lose weight, or in order to be on a diet, that it has to be hard, that it has to suck, that it has to be not fun, and they just need to grin and bear it. And really, we want whatever plan that you're on to be relatively flexible within your lifestyle, right? You can have the cupcake at the kid's birthday party, that kind of thing. So this is kind of one of those diets where it is heavily restricted. And part of the big concerns from a dietetic standpoint is if it's super restrictive, that also means that you may or may not be getting the nutrients that you need in order to thrive, right? The nutrients you need in order to perform optimally from a physical and a mental standpoint, right? To be able to push through your workouts, to be able to be like mentally awake during your shift. So some of the things, again, that carnivore cuts out are your fruits and your veggies. And the biggest nutrient, well, maybe not the biggest, but one of the big nutrients of concern there is, for anybody who knows me, I'm the biggest fiber nag you will ever meet, right? Fiber is my favorite nutrient, mostly because most of my first responders, regardless if they're on carnivore or not, are not getting enough fiber in their diets. And the reason that fiber is so important is because, one, it helps clean you out. So actually, one of the biggest challenges is on carnivore is people get constipated, right? Or their bowel movements go completely out of whack. And part of that is because fiber helps push things out. So it'll help bulk things up if you go in too frequently, and it'll push things out if you're not going enough. And on carnivore, there is no option to get fiber. You can't do fruits, you can't do veggies, you can't do whole grains. You can only do animal-based products, and the animal-based products do not have fiber. So, that's a big concern from a health perspective, because fiber is an indigestible form of carbohydrate that helps clean you out, but it also helps with regulation of cholesterol. So between the high saturated fat intake and the lack of fiber, we can see LDL cholesterol start to skyrocket. So this diet is not going to be for anybody who's already having trouble managing their cholesterol and does not want to be on a statin, because that could potentially push your doctor, depending on where your age range is and, family history and all of that, to potentially start considering a statin, especially if we see it jump up, the LDL jump up when you start a ketogenic or carnivore-based diet. So fiber helps with that as well. The other thing that we see with fiber is there are some studies that are suggesting that for every 10 grams of fiber someone increases, they see a 10% reduction in all-cause mortality, which is huge. So this is particularly in populations who are, deficient in fiber or don't eat enough fiber to begin with. So, if you're already at 25 grams of fiber, 30 grams of fiber, like that may not really, you may not see that same benefit, right? But fiber is incredibly protective for our health. And we find it in fruits, veggies, whole grains, plant-based foods. You cut out all the plant-based foods, you don't have the opportunity to get the fiber. So, with that, in terms of how much fiber you're supposed to get per day, we are aiming for 25 grams for women and 30 to 38 grams for men. You're not getting it on this diet. So that's a big, big red flag, big concern for me, because again, that helps keep people full. It helps regulate blood glucose and blood cholesterol. And then it also helps with your poops, which is important, right? And then the other big concern for carnivore diets is when you cut out plants, you also cut out a lot of opportunities for plant-based antioxidants and phytochemicals that are not only super important for cancer risk reduction, cardiovascular disease prevention, recovery from your shift so you don't feel like garbage, right? Those polyphenols are important, but also polyphenols are very important for the gut microbiome, right? So that's a big buzzword in the universe right now. I probably need to get someone on here to talk about that in detail. But the gut microbiome is really important, and the gut microbiome thrives not only off of fiber, but also polyphenols. So when you cut those out of the diet, then you see issues in multiple different areas of the digestive system. So these restrictive diets, and listen, you know what also is a restrictive diet? Vegan diets, vegetarian diets. Technically vegans is the most restrictive, right? So years before keto, we had Engine 2, which was a vegan diet, a low-fat vegan diet, kind of the opposite of carnivore. And the thing with vegan diets is at the very least, you're not only getting the plants and the benefits of the plant foods, the gap is often the protein. But if you're strategic enough with the types of plant-based foods you're choosing, so beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, quinoa, certain grains, you can hit your protein goals, right? And even with keto, like you can hit your fiber goals with berries, nuts and seeds, and then even the like low carb veggies, the leafy greens kind of thing, you can hit that. With carnivore, there's no option. And that's the big concern there, right? Is the fact that it's cutting out many, many food groups. And those food groups are important for our health. Now, with that, the other side of the carnivore diet that I have a concern with is the performance aspect of this, right? So carbohydrates are incredibly important for performance. And listen, we can talk about metabolic flexibility, and being able to use more fat can be helpful during high intensity work. However, carbohydrates, first responders, your job is forcible entry, picking up equipment, hose drag, ladder raises, all of those things usually rely on carbohydrates as that first fuel source. So you'll probably feel your best if we preload with carbs and then regularly replace with carbs throughout trainings, drills, and those kinds of things. Now you lose that opportunity with carnivore. So the concern is for performance. Now, the question is, okay, well, Megan, if you hate the carnivore diet or you don't love what this is doing from a health perspective, then why are people so obsessed with it, right? And here's the thing, we don't really have a whole lot of randomized controlled trials, and I'm kind of looking off to the side a little bit if you're watching, because we don't really have those randomized controlled trials for the carnivore diet, and we definitely don't have it in the fire service. This is just in the general population. Now, there was a survey done on over 2,000 adults. I believe they went into like a carnivore Facebook group and had people participate in this study. They did use a Likert scale for that study. And, they did see that people reported very high levels of satisfaction and improvements in health when following the carnivore diet. So people do feel better on this diet. And why do people feel better if you're so concerned with the diet? Well, part of it is a lot of times people are attracted to this diet because they're coming in with some sort of GI issues or other potential like low-key food intolerances or high-key food intolerances and sensitivities. And when they cut out a lot of different foods, they feel a lot better. So it's essentially an elimination diet, which is a tool that dietitians will use if someone is struggling with GI issues, right? And elimination diets aren't fun. Basically, you eliminate all your favorite foods, your dairies, a lot of times dairy. Carnivore doesn't eliminate dairy, but your grains, your sometimes nuts and seeds. It just depends on what the person is struggling with. And then we slowly add each food group in and see if it causes the GI issues. And then we kind of know what our culprit is. You might say, well, why don't I just do some sort of food sensitivity testing from the internet? And those food sensitivity tests just don't have the evidence behind them right now. And a lot of times they're actually telling people that they're sensitive to something that they're not sensitive to. And then they cut out products that they didn't need to cut out. It adds more stress, right? So with that, this study, the survey that was conducted, it didn't, do portion size or collect blood work or other health measures. It was just strictly based off of what people were reporting in the survey. And again, this diet eliminates a lot of stuff, right? It doesn't just eliminate the good stuff, but it eliminates a lot of the bad stuff. And what I mean by bad stuff or stuff we want to cut back on, the processed foods, right? You can't have chips, you can't have cake, you can't have cookies, you can't have any of that stuff. It cuts out alcohol, and it also cuts out energy drinks, which is a firefighter favorite. Chiefs and wellness pros, are your first responders struggling with nutrition because they just can't figure out how to apply it on shift work? Are they showing up to shift underhydrated and over-caffeinated? Do they struggle with body composition, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood glucose, but don't know how to make the changes on shift that will actually move the needle? Then the Fueling Fire workshop is for you. These 4 to 6 hour workshops are designed for peer fitness trainers, company officers, academy instructors, or just general first responders who are looking to learn more about nutrition that they can apply immediately that day at the workshop. The Fueling Fire workshop provides practical strategies for packing a go bag, hydrating on the fire ground, preventing nutrition-related injuries in recruits, aka making sure they eat enough so that they don't pass out during PT. The Fueling Fire workshop is instructed by yours truly, Megan Lautz, a dietitian that has a proven 3-step framework to overhaul the basics, aka Nutrition 101, but in a way that you've never seen it done before for the fire service. The second part of the framework is igniting optimal performance. How do I hydrate? How do I pack a go bag? How do I optimize my energy levels on the fire ground realistically? The third step in the framework is igniting lifestyle changes. How do I eat healthier with fast food? What can I make for dinner? How do I change the environment at the station? Practical strategies that can help your first responders eat better themselves and promote long-term changes in your overall department. Plus, if you book by February 28th, you get the Quick Bites videos for free. This is a $1,300 value that extends or prolongs the life of the Fueling Fire workshop. These are 12 10-minute videos that you can add into your learning management software, aka Target Solutions, with quick tips on how first responders can eat healthier on shift that day. Go to rescuerd.com to book a discovery call today. Right? It cuts out a ton of crap out of the diet that, quite frankly, if we just cut out the processed crap, the chips, the cookies, that kind of thing, the alcohol and the energy drinks, I bet the fire service would feel a hell of a lot better regardless. And we could still keep the fruits and the veggies and the whole grains, right? So it eliminates a lot of the crap so people do feel better. And listen, if you were going to try and change up your diet, eliminate those 3 things and see if they help. Now, I'm also not pretending that eliminating those 3 things is easy by any means, especially if you're kind of leaning on alcohol as a coping mechanism. Like, that's a whole another profession, right? You need to talk to potentially a mental health professional there. But you could eliminate these things and still have the fruits and veggies and whole grains, right? And still have the benefit there. So, and still get the fiber. That's the considerations there. Now, what if you're like, Megan, listen, I really want to try this. Maybe I've got some gut issues. I've seen a friend lose a ton of weight from this diet. I want to try it, or my whole shift's on board. Should I do it? And listen, I value a person's autonomy to choose what diet they want to follow, right? I might not agree with it. The evidence might not agree with it. But if you want to try something and see how you feel on it, let's go for it. But however, with the carnivore diet, from my professional opinion, it should be a short-term follow, 3 months max, and you are healthy with no pre-existing conditions. Okay. Remember, the cholesterol will jump up, especially if you have cholesterol issues. So I don't want you to have any medical conditions that could potentially be exacerbated by consuming this quantity of meat, particularly saturated fat. The concern with saturated fat is it actually raises LDL cholesterol. It also raises HDL. So it raises the good and it raises the bad. However, it raises the bad to a point that can be concerning, especially if you go to your health clinic. So due to the risks for cardiovascular disease in the fire service and sudden cardiac events. So with that, this is kind of one of those things where we knock it out. If you have gout, if you have pre-existing kidney conditions, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, you're pregnant, breastfeeding, let's hold off on this. But if you are healthy and you want to try it for 3 months, let's try it for 3 months, see how you feel. But after 3 months, what I want you to do is transition into more of a ketogenic style diet that incorporates the fruits, the low carb fruits, the low carb veggies back into the diet so that at least you can get the fiber, at least you can get the phytochemicals, and you can get some level of balance. Am I still concerned from a performance standpoint? Absolutely. Do I think that long term you'll be able to push as hard as you could with carbs or incorporating carbs in? Probably. But at the same time, if you don't have GI issues anymore, your stomach isn't killing you, you feel better, you personally feel like you have more energy, you've got to kind of really pay attention to these things, right? As a professional, I can guide you based off of the evidence. I can guide you based off of what you feel. But in general, I don't really recommend the carnivore diet or the ketogenic diet. And the primary reason is because I don't feel like it's a long-term solution for most firefighters. They're going to want to have the cupcake with their kids. They're going to want to have a beer at their retirement. They're going to want to have some flexibility in their food choices. And maybe this is just a short-term thing. You're doing it for 6 months to see some weight loss, that kind of stuff. But the other side of the 6 months to see some weight loss is I need you to work with a professional when you're ready to transition back into like a normal diet, right? And the reason I say that is because people get off these diets and then they gain all the way back and then some. So if you work with a dietitian, and I've worked with several of my first responders transitioning out of a ketogenic diet, what we end up doing is we slowly add carbs back in. We keep the calories either at maintenance or at a slight deficit so that you don't gain all the weight back. And we work over the course of 6 months to a year to get you back into a normal carb diet without blowing back up, right? And when I say blowing back up, it's like how you feel. You get more bloated, your pants don't fit, the weight comes back. So we do this without the weight coming back, right? And working with a nutrition professional can help you do that. And then also determine like, okay, well, if you don't like going much more than 40% of your diet coming from carbs, that's okay. Here's how we do that in a healthy way. So the bottom line, I don't think the carnivore diet is a good fit for the fire service. I think this is going to be a fad that blows over in the next year or two. However, some people, they want to try it, they want to see it, and you have the autonomy to do so. Do it short term. Now, if I was going to pick a diet that was going to be the best fit for the fire service that we have evidence for in the general population for, and the evidence in the fire service for through Dr. Stefano Kales is the Mediterranean diet. And the Mediterranean diet is essentially the opposite of the carnivore diet for the most part. But the Mediterranean diet does include red meat to a degree. It does include poultry and fish in higher amounts. It includes fruits and veggies, that kind of thing. And it's much more flexible to do in the fire service. You can easily find things at fast food restaurants. You can easily find packaged products that fit the Mediterranean diet that are portable and convenient. And that diet's more balanced. We have more evidence behind it. And we know people can stick to it long term. So again, we're going to make a choice. Carnivore, it's going to be short term. We're going to phase into keto, and then we'll phase into low carb under the supervision of a professional to make sure that we are checking everything off. If you have any questions or any comments on this, please shoot me an email, megan@rescuerd.com, or follow me on Instagram @rescue.rd. Thank you for listening, and have a safe and healthy shift.
Remove carcinogens and get your gear compliant clean with Unimac laundry equipment. Find it at alliancelaundry.com/fire.